Good morning, everyone. My name is Vinny Finellis. I am a program officer for AmeriCorps New Jersey. And thank you for your interest and welcome to AmeriCorps Formula Notice of Funding Opportunity for the 22-23 program year. I'll be going through basics of what AmeriCorps is, and then I'll be handing it off to my colleague, Yvette Ramos. She's the administrator of AmeriCorps New Jersey. She'll go into more of the technical aspects of the application. So let's get started. Oh, this is just a agenda of what we'll be going. I have number 1 and Yvette has 2, 3, and 4. Yay, so I'll be the good cop, she'll be the bad cop. What is AmeriCorps? You know, I didn't know what it was. I am guilty. Before I started working here, had no idea. But it is referred to as the Domestic Peace Corps. It's a federal funded program, an independent agency that utilizes members to serve communities throughout New Jersey. Right now we have about around 20 programs, all the way from covering all of New Jersey. On our website, you'll find a nice video. And actually, if you go to YouTube, you can find plenty of videos about AmeriCorps and what it is. We can give you those links in the future. So, in a nutshell, AmeriCorps is a term of service, a commitment. What it's not a job. It's not volunteering. It is service work. It's a network of local and state and national service programs that connect nearly 100,000 people each year to serve and meet community needs. At the beginning of the program year, usually in the fall and then it'll end into the summer, the State Commission, which is us, we hold what's called the Launch training session. It's geared towards members, and at that time, we have our members make a pledge. And you'll see one of the things that really resonates with me is that last line, I will get things done. Because throughout all of AmeriCorps, up and down, the national part and throughout the country, that's pretty much the motto, we get things done. All right, on this slide is the National Service, the funding tree. I'm gonna go from the bottom up. We're going to go up the yellow brick road. You potentially, as an applicant, can be a subprime subgrantee. What that means is, well, the State Commission, us, we are the prime grantee. So we actually will get the state funding from the level above that, AmeriCorps USA. And then it filters on up because it is that federal program signed by Bill Clinton, I think in 1993. So when that all was developed, it kind of trickles down all the way. The funding will trickle down all the way to the subgrantee, which potentially is you. So focus areas. Members are needed to accomplish goals that their programs, the subgrantees, have determined as community needs. And they range from education, environment, public safety, and health. These are the focus areas that, that AmeriCorps concentrates on. What did AmeriCorps members accomplish this year? This is a glimpse. Honestly, it's a lot. You don't think about it, or people don't normally think about service. And to have all of these members, like recruited 9,000 volunteers, 1,700 individuals affected by disaster served. I'll tell you, last year, just in New Jersey, we had suffered Hurricane Ida, and we had help from various states, AmeriCorps members from various states come and help in a disaster response. So there's a lot of good work just in our own backyard. Now we're at service requirements. You have to be at least 17 years of age or older. If you are 17, you need parental consent in order to serve. High school diploma or GED or working towards it, and a US citizen, permanent resident of the United States. Benefits for all members. So remember, this is service. This is not a job, and this is not volunteering. I can't stress that enough. Some people will think, oh, I can take a gap year and do AmeriCorps, but this living allowance is not going to pay you what you will be getting at a part-time job somewhere else. It is a living allowance. It is structured where it's the same amount throughout your term of service. But what benefits and what we've heard from members that service can be life-changing. Gaining personal, professional experience, working as a team. And there are other benefits such as loan forbearance and interest accrual. What's actually very interesting too is not only do the members, but their immediate family members or their households can take advantage of a member assistance program. And that's a 24/7 hour, 7-day a week toll-free telephone service for our members, their families or households, to talk about anything regarding counseling, and especially right now with the COVID pandemic that we're still in, life coaching, sort of work and resource referrals. It's a very good program that's offered to all of our members. So again, this is service. There's a contract that members have to sign. So it's very important to be very clear with them about their service contract and how many hours that they are going to agree to serve. So it's broken down full-time, three-quarter time, half-time. There's actually even abbreviated time. And you'll see across on this slide, at the end of that term's service or agreed upon contracted service, the member can earn an educational award. This educational award is taxable. You can use it within up to 7 years to use the award. What's interesting is that you can actually transfer this. If the member is 55 or older, you can actually transfer your educational award to a child, grandchild, or foster child or stepchild. That's very interesting. I always thought that was a great benefit, because if you yourself can't use it, you can actually pass that off to someone. Interestingly, too, there's a list of colleges and universities that will match this educational award. There's a link here. We can provide it to you also. Term limits, interesting. A member can now serve up to 4 terms of service, but cannot earn or receive more than the equivalent of 2 full-time awards. Now, this is broken down to the lifetime of the member. So 4 terms of service cannot earn or receive more than the equivalent of 2 full-time awards. So if your program, you decide to accomplish your goal, you have half-time members. That person can come back and do another half-time. That would be 2 half-times would be a full, and then maybe take a break from AmeriCorps for a couple of years, but then come back and then do another half-time. That member can still be earning up to that 2 full-time educational award. Now, this is a little serious. This is probably the most serious that I'll talk. Actually, no, there'll be more serious stuff coming out, but I am still the good cop. Background checks. Vanessa McCall from our staff will talk about this a little bit more in depth if you go forward with the application and you are granted into AmeriCorps. Background checks. This is something required by the feds, and actually the state of New Jersey. At the state commission, we go a little bit further. We require all of these things checked off. We take this part very seriously. Prohibited activities. This is the other serious thing that I'll talk about. So there are certain things as a member that are really not allowed. Now, these are things listed that you can do on your personal time, or the members can do on their personal time, just not during their hours of service, and especially not wearing any AmeriCorps gear. You'll see here attempting to influence legislation, engaging in protests or petitions, participating in or endorsing events that include advocacy against political parties. A lot of these things shouldn't be done during service hours anyway, but certainly there's different scenarios. You can always check with the state commission or your assigned program officer to make sure that members are acting accordingly. This should be explicitly explained to the members at the time of their signing their contract as well. Members also cannot be substitutes or take the place of people that are, say, on leave. So if the service site has someone that's on a sick leave, the AmeriCorps member is not supposed to fulfill that person's duties. Members should be striving to accomplish the goals that program has set out. The program has identified an area that needs improvement in the community, and that's what the AmeriCorps member should be doing. So this next slide goes into a little bit more. AmeriCorps members are not cheap laborers or a receptionist or a janitor. They are working in these programs for a specific need to change what is identified as a community need. Supervision of AmeriCorps members. A member is not allowed to supervise other members. Now, going back to what we were talking about with the educational award, with a potential member that is serving multiple service years, during multiple service years, that member can be a lead, but not so much supervising other members. All right, we're actually going to hold questions to the end. I'm going to pass this off to Yvette, who will be talking more about the technical assistance. If you do have questions right now, you can post it in the chat, but now I'm handing it off to Yvette.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yvette Ramos. I'm the AmeriCorps Administrator with the New Jersey Commission, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual process of applying to be an AmeriCorps subgrantee. What I encourage you to do is just to think about this as something that you're going to try on like a jacket and see if it's a good fit for your organization. Not everyone's a good fit for AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps is a program that provides you with a lot of capacity in terms of AmeriCorps members, but it's not a grant that's going to really give your organization a lot of administrative funds, a lot of operational funds. So most of it is going to the member stipends, but there will be some funds available for, for actually operating the program. This year, particularly, National AmeriCorps has somewhat changed the requirements for this and the funding formula, which will allow the programs to actually have a little bit more funds available for the operations and administrative side. But we'll go into that when we talk a little bit about the budget towards the end of this slideshow. Right now, we're going to talk about the actual application for the Nofa. So here's a timeline for this application. On March 7th, we disseminated our Nofa flyer, and if you are attending, you obviously were able to access that. All of our information will be going on to the NJDOS website. And what we have there is basically the flyer, the Nofa, and a great video that I definitely encourage you all to look at because it speaks to the kinds of service that AmeriCorps members do. And I know Vinny mentioned that, but I really strongly encourage you to take a look at that video. We will later on also be putting other resources on there. So again, check it from time to time throughout the application process. On March 16th, we will have, which is today, we're going to be actually doing the technical assistance session via Zoom, and everybody has to attend that. So this session is a requirement in order to be able to apply for AmeriCorps. And the reason we do that is because AmeriCorps is not the easiest program to administer or to just submit an application for. There's a lot of things that you have to kind of do and be aware of. So we want to make sure that applicants have that information. On the 18th, we're going to have another technical assistance session, which is focusing on the program design side, the theory of change, evidence, logic models, and performance measures. This TA session is conducted by an organization called CREES. It's the Center for Research and Evaluation in Human Services and Education, and they are out of Montclair State University. We've been partnering with them for the last 6 or 7 years, and they do a fabulous job on teaching or educating applicants on what theory of change is, what is evidence, what is considered good evidence, what are the tiers, and how to write a logic model and performance measures. And even if your organization has done this in the past for other grants, we strongly recommend that you attend, or actually it's a requirement that you attend the session so that you pretty much have all the information you need in order to put it into eGrants. On April 14th is the notice of intent to apply to the commission. The form is right there. On the 21st is the due date for your full application. By 4 p.m. We will not review anything after the 4 p.m. submission. So please make sure that you have started your application in eGrants well before the 21st. I can only say that eGrants typically has some glitches at times, and you may have to go to the help desk, and that would require some time. So please don't leave your application for the last minute. What I do recommend is also putting your application in a Word doc in terms of the narratives. Have your budget done on an Excel spreadsheet so that you have that information. I will have a sample budget available on our website sometime next week. So again, check our website for that. And the staff review of the application will also begin shortly afterwards. On the 22nd, our staff starts to review for completion. If your application is not complete, it will not be reviewed. And then we will have our technical assistance for our readers. We already have readers lined up. And they do an independent reading alone, doing their scoring individually, and then they come back to an arena session, what we call the arena session on the 12th, where we share the scores and they have conversations about it, and that's another opportunity based on their conversations with each other where they may find that one reader found something they did not or whatever, and that's an opportunity for our readers to actually make some changes on their scores, and they apply their final scores, and then those applications are ranked, and we rank them and fund them in that rank order. You need to achieve 75 points in order to be considered for funding. And once the funding is exhausted, that's where we stop. So we will, if there are other individuals, other applicants that scored above 75, but we ran out of funding, we just hold on to them, because sometimes in year 2 or 3 that we find additional funding, or even within that same year, we find additional funds, and then we go back and we try to fund them as well. On May 13th, the notification of applicants will be selected, who were selected will be notified, and then we start with some revisions for applicants that may have been recommended by the readers or by staff. And then we have the final staff review on these revisions on May 24th. Our commission board will vote on or around May 26th, and then we submit the application as a package to AmeriCorps National. Now, the difference between formula and competitive, we do run two competitions. The one in the fall is called the competitive process. That particular competition is one where they compete first at the state level. Applicants compete first, at the state level, and then those that are selected by the readers are then elevated to a national competition where those applications compete with applicants from all of the 50 states and a couple of the other territories. And then AmeriCorps National typically selects those. The formula process only, which is this process that we're conducting now, it generally takes place in the spring. And what we do basically is we use those funds to kind of grow AmeriCorps, because the national process, getting funded at the national level, sometimes a little more difficult. It's a much more rigorous process. So what we try to do with our formula funds is fund these programs through our formula so that they can have a couple of years of running AmeriCorps, so that they can then, after 6 years, they have to apply for competitive funding. But for our formula right now, you only compete with each other from other applicants from the state of New Jersey. So it is rigorous, but it is not as rigorous as the competitive. So, okay, next slide. Okay, talking a little bit about the different NOFA sections, and NOFA means Notice of Funding Opportunity. The section 1 is the New Jersey Commission grant information and timelines. Section 2 is the Corporation on National Community Services, NOFA. It's now called AmeriCorps. I have changed some aspects of the criteria, particularly in that NOFA. So just be aware that if you look at the original NOFA that came out for this competition, it's somewhat changed, but I tried to keep as much information the same as possible. Section 3 is the mandatory supplemental guidance. This is where some of the concepts that are defined that are in the NOFA are defined, so that you get a better definition of, what certain words that are used in the NOFA mean. One of the areas that I strongly encourage you to read in the mandatory supplemental guidance is the section on evidence, because the section on evidence will take a deeper dive into the definition of the various tiers. What is considered a preliminary tier? What is considered a preliminary tier? What is considered a moderate or a strong tier of evidence? And when we talk about evidence, we mean looking at research, looking at studies that prove that the approach that you're going to be taking in your application has already been demonstrated to work. And so you're going to refer to that evidence in your application, kind of listing, how it's the same, how it may differ, but that's the evidence that you're going to show and demonstrate that your application is definitely going to work and your approach to service is going to be possible and create great impact in the community. Section 4 is the corporation's application instructions. So this is where you're going to, and let me just say that only section 1 and 2 are in hard copy on our website. Sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to be links that will link you back to the AmeriCorps.gov webpage for that information. Those are in PDF format. Okay, so just so that you know that there's a little bit of a difference in the way you're going to view these. So the application instructions is basically how you're going to get onto Egrants, and it kind of follows through the process of where you're going to put the information and the way you're going to put that information into Egrants. Okay. Section 5 is going to be the performance measures for the application, and that's basically, we'll talk a little bit more about performance measures, and at the TA session that's conducted by CREES, they will take a deeper dive again also into performance measures. Performance measures are basically a snapshot in time of how you're going to measure your progress within the year of operations. So you're basically going to be required to do at least one aligned performance measure with an output and an outcome. But you could also say you want to do additional performance measures. We recommend that you do no more than 3 because it can get a little bit difficult to be applying all of the instruments that you're going to be needing to measure your outputs and your outcomes. So you want to be able to give yourself enough performance measures to show and demonstrate impact, but not overwhelm yourselves with a schedule of all of these instruments and performance measures that you need to measure, that it becomes unwieldy. So section 5 will talk about that. They'll walk you through those performance measures. And then section 6 is basically your financial management survey. It's not section 7. I don't know. That's That's an error there. But it's section 6 is the financial management survey. This is basically a questionnaire about your financial stability in your organization. And that's a requirement to submit along with your application. That will be submitted as a separate document. So you'll follow the instructions in the Nofa on how to submit separate documents. Okay, next. Okay, so these are the performance measures, the focus areas for the performance measures. When you look at the performance measures section, you will notice that they provide some standardized performance measures under these 6 different types of focus areas: economic opportunity, education, healthy futures, veterans and military families, disaster services, and environmental stewardship. And we'll go into detail about what each of these are comprised of. But I also want to mention that even within these focus areas, if you don't see a standardized performance measure that you want to use under these focus areas, you can develop your own performance measures. If your organization is used to developing these, you can actually submit your own applicant, what they call applicant determined performance measure. Okay. So under economic opportunity, grants will provide support and facilitate access to services basically focused on economically disadvantaged individuals to help them to improve access to services that enhance financial literacy, transition into or remain in safe, healthy, affordable housing, or have improved employability, leading to increased success in becoming employed. So the areas that the AmeriCorps is looking for or has proposed in this area of economic opportunity is financial literacy, housing, and employability, increasing employability and becoming employed. Okay. Education, improved educational outcomes, improved school readiness for economically disadvantaged children, improving educational and behavioral outcomes of students in low achieving elementary, middle, and high schools, and or support economically disadvantaged students' preparation for success in post-secondary educational institutions. Also, educational opportunities for students experiencing homelessness or those in foster care. So basically, education runs the gamut from kindergarten all the way up to post-secondary education, like creating a seamless stream between high school and college. And so you can focus on any one of those 8 grades, or all of them, or a section, or a particular group of them. Some programs focus on grades 1 to 3, others focus on just high school students, and so it depends on where you think, or where your organization would think they would want to make the greatest impact. A lot of programs also propose things like mentoring programs to help improve some of the academics as well. They do tutoring, they do enrichment activities after school, safe havens after school as well. So there's a lot of area. The area of education has a lot of possibilities and possible areas. So take a look at the performance measures that are listed there as well. Healthy Futures, grants will provide support for activities that will address the opioid crisis, increase seniors' ability to remain in their own homes with the same or improve quality of life for as long as possible, and or increase physical activity and improve nutrition with the purpose of reducing obesity. Also, more recently, in the more recent years, they have added COVID-19 pandemic, basically assisting in all areas of mitigating the effects of the pandemic, preparation. So we do a lot of services around COVID-19 pandemic as well. Okay. Veterans and military families grants will improve the quality of life for veterans and improve military family well-being. So we're looking at veterans, wounded warriors, military service members, and their caregivers, families, and survivors served by AmeriCorps programs. So not only the individuals who are in the military, but their families as well. And it could be while they're in service, it could be after they have already served. So, you know, services that range from anything from health through getting them back into the world of, you know, employment, assisting them to access services. So we don't have a lot of veterans or military family program focused programs in New Jersey. So this is an area that we really don't have a lot. Right now, the biggest focus area that we have, or biggest concentration, is education programs, followed by health programs as well. Okay, next. Disaster services grants will support increased and improved disaster services for individuals and communities to prepare and adapt to disasters. So we're looking at things like mitigation, preparation for disasters, readiness to respond to disasters, recovery efforts from disasters, implementation of pre-disaster mitigation and adaptation measures. Grants will support communities and individuals in planning for disasters, in particular engaging disadvantaged communities in the planning process. Disaster services is one of those areas where we see an increased need. You know, as recent as last year, we had Hurricane Ida come through New Jersey. Prior to that, we've seen the effects of Hurricane Sandy. You know, on the West Coast, there's all the fires and that are also burning and things. So a lot of need for disaster services, and we don't have, again, this is another area we really don't have programs focusing in this area as well. So we certainly welcome. And then environmental stewardship, with climate change and becoming such a focused area. This is again increasing we're getting more programs focusing on environmental stewardship as well. Grants will support responsible stewardship of the environment while preparing communities for challenging climate and environmental circumstances. Programs that conserve natural habitats, protect clean air and water, maintain public lands, support wildland fire mitigation and sustainable forest management. Cultivate individual and community resilience through education of conservation and those kinds of things, and provide reforestation services, environmental stewardship, climate change mitigation, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, building community resilience, sustainable food systems and agriculture, and conservation and habitat preservation. So there's a wide range of services that many of our AmeriCorps members do under environmental stewardship as well. Okay. All right, so those were the 6 focus areas. If you have questions on those, please, ask those questions. We'll have during our Q&A session. Performance measures, as I mentioned before, your application must have at least one aligned performance measure, an output and an outcome that corresponds to the proposed primary intervention. This may be a national performance measure or an applicant determined measure. See the performance measure instructions for details about performance measure requirements and selection rules. Now, if you use the national performance measures, you're going to notice little numbers delineating what that performance measure, whether it's an output or an outcome. When you go to write your performance measures or input your performance measures into Egrants, please include those numbers, because that will help the reader of your application understand a little bit more about what you're trying to describe in your performance measure. Now let's talk 1 second about outputs and outcomes. Most of you already have this knowledge of what are outputs and outcomes, but if you don't, in a nutshell, what an output is basically your units of service. So for instance, you have 10 AmeriCorps members who are going to be doing an employment program. They're going to be doing some education around employment. So let's say they do 5 sessions a week, or 5 sessions over a period of a month to educate people on, the different things that they need to prepare themselves for a job. Things like resume writing, maybe 1 session's on interviewing, and so on and so forth. The number of people who attend those sessions, the number of sessions, all of those are considered outputs. Okay, there are services that they're providing, but they don't know if they make a difference in the lives of those beneficiaries yet. Okay. In order to know what the difference is of whether or not what they're teaching is making a difference in increasing knowledge or increasing skills, they would need to write an outcome. What is the expected outcome of going through this training? Well, the expected outcome may be something like getting a job. Okay, so that would be one of the outcomes. So you're going to write an output and an outcome, a matching outcome, and your outcome, basically the way that you would measure this would be through things like a pre-test and a post-test, and so on. For your outputs, how would you measure that? You would measure that by keeping a log of attendees, your agendas, that you actually held a particular training, and so forth. Okay, so when you go to the performance measures instructions, they're going to list for you the types of instruments that you would be developing, according to whether it's an output or an outcome for that particular thing. So for instance, if it's housing, okay, what are some of the ways that you can demonstrate the housing? So maybe one thing would be for an outcome that you actually were able to rent an apartment, or maybe you were able to buy a house. So whatever the documentation demonstrating that, a copy of your contract, a copy of a mortgage, those would be the kinds of documentation that you would provide you would be expected to have copies of, demonstrating that those beneficiaries actually achieve those outcomes. Okay. All right. Let's move on then, because the training for CREES is actually going to go further into detail on that. So one of the other things that you're going to do is to determine the type of program you're going to be applying for. Most of you will be applying as a regular cost reimbursement grant. So this will be where it funds your program costs, also your member living allowance costs as well. So most of you will be under that. A professional core generally is a program that's a little bit different in that the programs place professionals in communities where there's a documented shortage of such professionals, and the stipends and salaries are paid by other organizations. Typically, we do have 2 professional core programs in our portfolio at the Commission. They're both education programs. They both operate in urban cities, where what they're doing is basically they're getting paid by the local school district. So those AmeriCorps members are getting paid by the local school district. They're not getting funds from AmeriCorps in order to pay their stipend. So that's one of the differences between professional core and regular cost reimbursement. Full cost fixed amount grants are only available for recompeting applicants. So just be aware, if you want to apply, if you've been funded through our commission for a while now, and you want to apply as a fixed amount grants, you may do so. So the difference is that you would apply for a fixed amount of funds based on the MSYs or full-time equivalents, and use your other resources for the remaining costs of the program. There are no match requirements, but just be aware that you would need to be able to provide additional funds from your organization in order to run the program. You would not have to submit to us budgets and those kinds of things for fixed amount grants. We'll just give you the amount of funds based on the maximum cost for MSY, and I'll explain what that is in a little bit. But again, this option is only available for recompeting applications. Organizational eligibility to apply, it's pretty much open to just about any organization as long as it's not a for-profit. Okay, so government, nonprofits, community organizations, faith-based organizations, you have to have a 501c3. That's, one of the requirements, and you need to be registered under New Jersey Charities registration as well in order to be funded by our Department of State. Okay. Page limitations, there are 2 page limitations. The first one is your narrative section. So when you go into your narratives link, just be aware that you cannot have more than 10 pages. So I recommend you put your narratives on a Word document, and then you copy and paste them into these sections. And then you're going to go to what is called the review button. There's like a review link, and you're going to be able to look at your application and determine whether you're within those 10 pages. Okay, the 10 pages will encompass the executive summary, the face sheet, okay, and please include that face sheet in your count because a lot of programs make that mistake, and then they wind up with 11 pages, and then we can't read the last page. So your face sheet first, your executive summary, the narrative portions which contain your program design, organizational capacity, cost effectiveness, and budget adequacy sections of the application. Now, the cost effectiveness and budget sections of your application, when you go into those sections, you're only going to have to put in NA, because no longer are you required to provide narrative for that section, for the budget section. You're going to include the detail, you're going to include it in the detail of your budget when you actually construct your budget. Okay, so you're just going to put NA in there. The corporation strongly encourages applicants to print out the application from review tab prior to submission. So again, don't just do a word count on your Word document. Make sure that you put all of the information into Egrants, and then you go to the review link, bring up the application, and do your count from there. Okay, you'll see how many pages you've gone to. All right. Okay. Now the other page limitation is on the logic model. The logic model may not exceed 3 pages when printed with the application from the review tab. Note that the length of the document in word processing may be different than when it prints out in the web-based system. You'll be able to create 4 or 5 pages, but it's not going to automatically stop you. That's why we continuously say, go to the review and check and make sure that your logic model is within those 3-page limits. Okay. The funding period for this, this is year 1. This will be year 1. If you're a new applicant, this will be year 1. Or if you're a recompeting program, it'll be year 1 of a 3 multi-year grant period covering the following periods. Year 1 goes from September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023. Year 2, September 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 24, and so on. Now, in year 1, that's the competitive year. So if you're funded or selected for this grant and you are a new or recompeting applicant, you will start year 1 in September of 2022. Years 2 and 3 will also, you'll have to put in what's called a continuation application. And what it basically does, it will copy your existing year 1 application, and you'll just update that in Egrants. Okay. Funding for year 2 and 3 are conditional upon satisfactory performance of year 1 or the prior year, basically. So just understand that this year 1 application tends to be the most rigorous, but year 2 and 3 continuations are not quite as daunting to write. Okay, applicants must fill out and submit the online intent to apply form by Thursday, April 14th. And this is the information, and there is the link for you to apply. Just be aware that we just want to know how many applications we should expect, because we need to make sure that we have an adequate number of readers for your applications. And it's also good for us to, in case of communications that, we need to go, to go back to you for some information or whatever, that we have that information there. Okay. Applications must submit electronically on Egrants no later than Thursday, April 21st. 4 o'clock. And as I mentioned, the application instructions will guide you through that Egrants application process. I can only say that the 2 sections that will take you the longest on that Egrants application will be the budget and the performance measures section. The logic model section is pretty straightforward. You just copy and paste from a logic model you've developed, and it's just straight out boxes. But the performance measures will take some time to navigate. So there's a lot of drop-down boxes that appear after you fill out certain sections. So it's not the most intuitive sections to fill out. So just be aware of that. Give yourself time to get those performance measures in. Okay. Additional documents, all documents that are requested in Section 2 AmeriCorps Nofa need to be sent to the New Jersey Commission and not to AmeriCorps, all right? Do not send your documents to AmeriCorps. You need to send them to us, okay? And basically you're going to be sending them to New Jersey AmeriCorps at SOS .nj.gov, I believe. Yeah. Applicants are required to submit the following additional documents. As I mentioned before, the financial management survey, any evaluation briefs or studies, reports or studies to support your evidence. And that's it basically, unless you you have a union and you need to submit a form that's required for those organizations. Okay. DUNS number and SAM registration. Okay, so you need to have a DUNS number. Make sure you have your organization has this well in advance of your submission, and you can contact DUNS request service. You also have to have SAM registration, which is being changed on April 4th to unique entity identifiers as part of the SAM registration process to replace the DUNS number starting April 4th, 2022. So the DUNS number is the one that's actually going to be changed. I'm sorry, not SAM. But the DUNS number, again, will be referred to as the unique entity identifier as part of that SAM registration. So just make sure that you have that information incorrectly. Now, the other point that I want to make about the SAM is that we typically have to do a search at the commission to make sure that everything is matching in terms of the name of your organization as well as how it's listed in SAM registration. If it's not, then we need to contact you to make some changes either in the name that you're putting into the application, or you're going to have to go to SAM registration and make that change. So in order to do that, we need to be able to search your records, and oftentimes organizations, there's a question that'll say, will you allow a search on your organization? You have to indicate yes. If you've indicated no, that can cause delays because either we will need the information or the feds will need the information, meaning AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps will hold up our award if they have to get back to us and say, oh, so-and-so is on a, is not able to receive funds, blah, blah, blah. And then we have to then go back to that organization and ask them for evidence or documentation that demonstrates that they are fundable and those kinds of things. Sometimes it could take a time. So we ask that you make sure that your organization authorizes by saying yes to the search authorization question. Okay. All right. Selection criteria. All right. So we're in part 3. We're going to check out what do you need to have, or what do you need to answer in terms of the questions and the criteria for this application. So this application is generally 100 points. The bulk of those points are going to go into your program design. So you need to make sure that this part is done correctly and it addresses all of the questions and so on. So we'll go into these one by one. Okay, next slide. Okay, your executive summary, there's no points ascribed to this. So you're going to copy and paste this information right into the executive summary. You're going to fill in the parentheses section. So you're going to put verbatim, please do not add, please do not take out any information from this, because this is what the AmeriCorps National will use to be able to publicize your information. If you get funded, they use this in their listings nationally and so on. So it needs to be exactly the way that is listed here. Just make sure that you fill out those blanks correctly. Okay. All right. Theory of change and logic model, that will give you 20 points. So obviously, if you do not have a strong theory of change and logic model, you're going to lose points. So you really want to know, that's why we require the theory of change session that will take place on March 18th, so that you have the information that you need to be able to develop this. That's 20 points. The evidence tier is 4 points, and then the evidence quality is 8 points. And they're going to cover more of this during their presentation, but I will talk very briefly about it in the next slide. Okay, so the theory of change shall address the problem that is prevalent and severe in communities. And most applicants that I see coming through AmeriCorps are really good at describing the need and the problem that they want to address. The proposed intervention is responsive to the identified community problems. So obviously there needs to be alignment between your intervention and the problem that you're seeking to address. So what is the intervention? It's basically the activities your AmeriCorps members are going to take to address the problem. And then the intervention needs to be clearly articulated, including the design, the dosage, and the target population and roles of the AmeriCorps members. The intervention is likely to lead to outcomes identified in the theory of change. Again, as I mentioned before in the performance measures discussion, outcomes are the change that you want to see in the problem. Okay, so basically your theory of change are those three elements: your problem, your intervention, and the outcome that you want to achieve. Those are the three basic columns, or of what a theory of change seeks to address. And that's the next one. The outcomes in the narrative and logic model represent meaningful progress in addressing the community problem. Okay, so it should be meaningful and it should be impactful. The rationale for utilizing AmeriCorps members to deliver the intervention is reasonable. So you want to talk a little bit about why and how you're going to be using those AmeriCorps members to address those problems and the intervention. And then the service role of the AmeriCorps members will produce significant contributions to existing efforts to address the stated problem. So AmeriCorps is basically there to add value to your organization. So it could be that this is a service you're already providing to the community, but you really want to create a much greater impact. And so you're bringing in these AmeriCorps members to add value, to increase your reach, to increase your impact in that particular area, service area. It could also be that it's a new dimension of the service, or something you've been wanting to add that you haven't been able to, and that you think that those AmeriCorps members would be perfectly suited to be able to provide that particular kind of service. So an example would be doing mentoring in a school, a particular school or schools, because those AmeriCorps members, are able to actually mentor certain students, and that's kind of a service that could create great impact in their academic achievement or in their behaviors. Maybe they'll come to school more often or whatever. Maybe they won't be as late, all of those things. Okay. So that's just an example. Okay, next. Okay, so the logic model, let's talk a little bit about the logic model. So a logic model is basically a visual interpretation of your theory of change. And it kind of defines it a little bit more. So the summary of the community problem, including the role current and historical inequities faced by underserved communities may play in contributing to the problem, the inputs or resources that are necessary to deliver the intervention, including locations or sites in which members will provide the service, and the number of AmeriCorps members who will deliver the service. So typically a logic model is about 6 different columns that you're going to be addressing. It's kind of a graphic. It's a linear graphic of what your service plan is going to be, that is identified in your theory of change. So the first column generally is your community problem. Talk about your need there. So make sure that you really flesh that out and you include all that information in there. Your inputs are all your resources. It's all of the things you're going to need to be able to do those services. It could include things like curriculum, as I mentioned here. It could be locations, the number of AmeriCorps members, resources from the organization, maybe additional teacher time, whatever that is, whatever your inputs are going to be. The core activities or the interventions, again, of the program model that the members will implement. And as I mentioned before, the duration of the intervention, the dosage, and the target population. You want to talk a little bit about how long that intervention is going to last and how much of it. So if it's going to be 3 times a week for 6 weeks, or whatever that is, again, that should all tie back into your evidence statement and your evidence that this approach and these interventions are kind of directly tied into each other, okay, or flow from each other. Okay, the measurable outputs that result from delivering the intervention. You talk a little bit about your outputs and outcomes, and I talked a little bit about this, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and then your evidence tier. So let's talk a little bit about the evidence tier. Generally, when you apply for a competitive grant, the evidence tier is like 12 points. So it's a big piece of the application, the national application. We've kind of reduced it to 4 points here in New Jersey because we want to provide an opportunity to see some continuation. Most of our applicants who come to our formula applicants generally start at the pre-preliminary level, meaning they don't have a lot of evidence. And so there's like a continuum that we want them to kind of grow into, so that by the end of 6 years, or the end of 3 years, if they so wish, they can apply to a national program, to be a national program, and have that evidence built up within their organization of how their approach is working. So basically, the evidence tier, as I mentioned, you're going to want to go to the mandatory supplemental guidance for a definition of the different tiers. And those tiers are pre-preliminary, where you basically don't have a lot of existing evidence, and you're going to be relying on studies and those kinds of things. Then preliminary, which means that you do have some information based on performance measures, that you've been collecting some data. And then you're going to go into moderate, and then strong evidence. And that's where you get a little more sophisticated with doing control groups, doing other statistical information, you know, that you're going to get on understanding, like a RCT that you're going to be doing basically to achieve strong evidence within your organization that your approach is working. So the intervention evaluated by the submitted reports must match the intervention proposed by the applicant in the following area. So you want to talk a little about how your evidence matches your intervention in terms of the characteristics of the beneficiaries, the characteristics of the population, the dosage, and the context in which the intervention is delivered, and outcomes of the intervention as well. So that's 4 points. Okay, evidence quality. So the evidence quality is 8 points. The standards applied to assess the quality of the preliminary, moderate, or strong evidence. So you're going to look at the methodology of your evidence, relatively recent, meaning within the past 6 years, and whether or not it's meaningful and the positive effect on the beneficiaries. So now we're looking at not only the tier, but what was the quality of that evidence as well. Okay, and then if you're proposing preliminary, it's the same, except it should include past performance measure data or cited research studies. Okay. Performance measures continued. Performance measures identify all components included in the logic model, and they should provide for adequate and quality data collection, including instruments. Okay, so there's a section now we've included for performance measures exclusively, where you're going to talk a little bit, you're going to fill in the link for performance measures, and you're going to include your data collection instruments, the instruments you're going to be collecting, and so on. And basically, here's the link again to the performance measures instructions. And then you're also going to describe in the narrative what your data collection schedule is going to be. So your performance measures, the first two bullets here, needs to be done in that link. And then in your narrative, you could talk a little bit about your data collection schedule, including the collection of baseline data, how you plan to do baseline data. And basically, baseline data is just that you're going to collect some initial data on your beneficiaries and then compare it throughout the year to see if actually that change is happening. Okay. All right. And again, our session on March 18th will go much more into detail on all of this, but this is just to give you an idea of, you know, what the expectation is going to be. So there's another section under program design that's called member experience. And for 10 points, this is where you're going to talk about your cadre of AmeriCorps members. So you're going to talk a little bit about the rationale by which you selected the number of members and slot types for your program. Now, just so that you know, we typically expect programs to at least have what's 5 MSYs or 5 full-time equivalents for new programs. Not under that. So if you're thinking that you only need 1 or 2 AmeriCorps members for your program, you may want to consider partnering with an existing program. We typically want to see programs that apply for at least 10 full-time equivalents or MSYs as defined by AmeriCorps, because otherwise it's very hard to create impact when you have such few numbers of AmeriCorps members. Now you can have different slot types, and I'll go more into this in a little bit, but basically 2 half-time members is the equivalent of 1 FTE or 1 MSY. So if you have a program that consists of 10 MSYs, or 10 FTEs, and they're all half-time members, you're going to have 20 AmeriCorps members serving. So 20 AmeriCorps members is the equivalent of 10 MSYs. Okay, that's just how they consider slot types. There are various different types of slot types, and there's a column that will describe what portion of that of an FTE or an MSY is the equivalent for that slot type. And we'll go into that in a minute. You're going to describe how you plan to conduct the onboarding process and orientation. So let me just say that the first day of service for AmeriCorps members has to be an orientation, where you're going to orient them to their timesheets, the expectations to their member contracts. You're going to review their member contracts, have them sign their member contracts. You're going to have an orientation that includes laying out basically, what the expectations of the host organization is, what are the available resources in that community. So you may have speakers from the community, you may have speakers from your organization come in. You're going to basically orient your cadre of AmeriCorps members on AmeriCorps and what the expectations of AmeriCorps are. You're going to tell them what is prohibited, and basically you're also going to talk to them a little bit about, how often they need to be doing service, depending on their slot type and so on. Members will have a position description that you will be developing for their service, and they need to serve according to those position descriptions. Those position descriptions will be tied into your program design and your performance measures. So these members are not just there to serve at the leisure or pleasure of your organization. They are there to serve according to the design of your program. And where we see sometimes some disconnect is where members are placed in partnering organizations, where the partnering organizations may not have been trained enough to understand that the members are there to do a particular service, and they have them doing all kinds of things. This is a problem. So we want to make sure that you're going to be defining what their position description is, and making sure that, as Vinny talked this morning, they're not doing things like being the receptionist or being the janitor or those kinds of things. They need to serve according to that position description. I can't emphasize that enough, because this is where we see a lot of issues come up. The other thing that you're going to talk a little bit about is having your members develop as leaders. So how do we develop our AmeriCorps members to become leaders? By giving presentations, by training them on topics that will help them develop as leaders, decision making, running a focus group in the community, all kinds of, and programs can develop their own curriculum on, how they want to develop AmeriCorps members as leaders, and so forth. Another thing you're going to talk a little bit about is how are you going to prepare these AmeriCorps members throughout their service for life after AmeriCorps, because AmeriCorps has a finite end. You can't serve more than 4 terms, okay? And so, and most AmeriCorps members serve basically up to 2 terms, most. Some of them do come back if they're half-time members or less than half-time members to continue to earn their education awards. But, generally there's kind of a finite end to AmeriCorps. So how are you going to help them to plan for their future career, whether it's going to college, whether it's, you know, taking those first steps and getting a job, whatever that is. One of our AmeriCorps programs has in their member contract that within their organization throughout the year, they have to interview at least 3 individuals to see, you know, what their career exploration was, what was their career path, how did you get, you know, into this position, did you like it, do you not like it, or whatever. So those are things that you want to be able to train your AmeriCorps member in career exploration exercises as well. Some do things like Myers-Briggs, some do things like True Colors. There's all kinds of exercises that can be done to help AmeriCorps members identify their strengths, you know, or whatever, to take those next steps after AmeriCorps. Okay. The program has a well-defined plan to recruit AmeriCorps members. Okay, so this is very important. You want to talk about how you plan to recruit. What are you going to be your sources? What is the criteria that you're going to develop for your typical AmeriCorps members? What are you going to look for in the AmeriCorps members? Are you going to require 2 years of college background? Are you going to basically you know, recruit from your local community? Or are you going to include a combination of national search along with local community? Are you going to have you know, different types of groups that you're going to? Some programs only want college student types of individuals or recent college graduates. Other programs are very open to other possibilities. So how you're going to define that plan to recruit. I can only tell you that recruitment has been a challenge in recent years because of the pandemic, and because, you know, jobs are now paying more and everything. So we'll talk a little bit about some strategies for that that we're looking at. But it is your organization's responsibility to recruit the full cadre of AmeriCorps members. So when you consider that, consider the number of AmeriCorps members you're going to bring into your organization, because if you're a new program, you're not going to be able to rely on the prior year members to re-up for another year. You're basically recruiting for the full cadre of those AmeriCorps members. In years 2 and 3, sometimes it's easier because some of those members come back and, you know, they continue to serve a second or third year. So, but that first year, you want to make sure you're onboarding and you're planning your sources, whether it's college fairs or recruiting from other organizations or social media. There's a lot of different ways to recruit, and you want to talk about that. You want to really be specific about how you plan to do that. Describe what a typical day will look like for your AmeriCorps members. So one of the things that will make or break a program is keeping the members engaged in service. If you have a cadre of AmeriCorps members who are just waiting around, waiting for somebody to tell them what to do, but their day is not, you know, is not meaningful, that's going to be a problem to retain your AmeriCorps members. So retention is really important in AmeriCorps because, you know, members start off being all excited in their first, you know, couple months. And then sometimes you have that, you know, that mid-year kind of like, oh, wow, this is taking longer than I thought it was going to take, and that kind of thing sometimes. So you want to be able to retain those members. And so, you know, what is a typical day going to look like for your AmeriCorps member? And then the applicant will foster an inclusive service culture. Again, looking at all kinds of backgrounds, talents, capabilities, and the application is also looking at diversity, equity, and an inclusion council that seeks to diversify its staff and board as well, and create a supportive and safe environment, as well as ensuring that its program is culturally and community appropriate. We at the Commission have a diversity and inclusion council, so you can actually designate a member or somebody from your organization, a staff member, to actually be part of that in order to kind of fulfill some of this criteria as well, if you don't have one. All right, next slide. Okay, organizational capability for 25 points. I know this is taking a while, but I wanted to go through this in detail to make sure that you have all the information. Now, most of this, you pretty much know how to talk a little bit about your, you know, the great things your organization does, so I won't belabor this particular point, but I do want to make the statement that because AmeriCorps requires a lot of administration, we do require that programs dedicate at least one full-time dedicated program manager to manage this program. Managing 10, 20 members, in many cases even more than that, is a full-time person's job. So don't think that you're going to be able to run this program on just, you know, somebody contributing 10, 15, or 20% of their time to this. It's not going to happen. You will have all kinds of issues. There's reports to be filled, completed. There's, you know, sites to visit and so on, seeing the members. There's service events to plan with your members and those kinds of things, meetings, individual meetings. There's a lot. And most of our successful programs actually have somebody assisting the program manager. So just putting that out there so that you don't underestimate the need to have, you know, a full dedicated person for this program. Okay, the organization has facilitated, partnered, or participated in educational workforce development programs. If you have that in your organization, please talk about it. And stated committee, again, as I talked about the DEI, the Diversity Council as well. Okay. Compliance and accountability continued. You have a monitoring and oversight plan to prevent and detect non-compliance. Okay, so just make sure that your the AmeriCorps rules are being followed, and how you check up on that to make sure that that's all being, you know, followed as well. No prohibited activities and those kinds of things. A system to prevent, detect, and mitigate the risk of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. And it has an effective mechanism to report without delay any suspected criminal activity, and so on. Next. Okay, culture that values learning. Basically that you use the information and for learning and decision making and improving your program. Let's see what else. Member supervision. Okay, as Vinny mentioned, AmeriCorps members cannot be supervised by other AmeriCorps members, so you have to have, if you have your programs members at various different sites, make sure that you have a site supervisor identified who can sign off on their timesheets, and, you know, just make sure that that's in place. They're going to have sufficient guidance and support from their supervisors to provide effective service. And that could be things like showing them the ropes, helping them learn the lay of the land, helping them to understand the tasks at hand, and so on. And the supervisors will be adequately trained and prepared to follow AmeriCorps and program regulations, priorities, and expectations. Okay. These criteria will be assessed. Okay, so cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. Basically, as I mentioned before, that you're just going to put C budget in the narratives portion for cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. And basically, you're going to follow all of this. Definitely take a look at the budget instructions and follow those in the application instructions supplement. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about constructing the budget, and we're getting close to the end here, so please hang in there with me. I know this is a long process, but it's important. It's easier to listen to this and to follow, you know, through this than to actually, you know, have to read the entire Nofa over and over again, even though I do recommend that you at least read it once. So this is important, the cost per MSY. So this is the formula that we use to determine how to fund our programs. So this is the first time that our cost reimbursement our cost per MSY is as high as it is for formula at $28,800. Now, most of the time, the one for this year is only at 20,000. So how does that work? What is a cost per MSY? So in order to determine the cost per MSY, you're going to take the number of MSYs or FTEs. So let's say that you're going to bring on 10 full-time AmeriCorps members, and you're going to multiply it by that 28,800. And so you're going to get $288,000 that you can apply for in federal funding. Okay, so that's basically how this works. So the example below, so the MSY is the federal AmeriCorps grant based on the number of MSYs or FTEs multiplied by the maximum cost per MSY. So that's the magic number there. An example is an applicant requesting 10 full-time members may apply for a maximum of 288,000. A program of 15 full-time members may apply for a maximum of 432,000. Now, because this is the first time that we're doing this, a lot of our ability to go up to that 28,800 will depend on a couple of things. Our formula allocation, which we do not know what it is this year. We anticipate that it will be either equal to last year's or more. So if we find that we run out, that we don't have enough funding to fund the applicants who are eligible, or enough to fund pretty much the bulk of them, we may have to come back and say, you know what, we're going to have to do across the board cuts to 27,000 or 28,000 or whatever that magic number is to be able to fully fund our portfolio. Okay, so, but I'm hoping that that won't happen because we do have what's called American Rescue Plan dollars to augment our formula allocation as well. The other factor that will be determining this, our ability to go to this 28,800 and fund all of our programs at that, will depend also on the number of programs, new and competitive new applications and recompetes that we get, and how big they are. So, so this is kind of, yes, plan your budgets around this, but be aware that that may have to shift a little bit downward. But I'm hoping that we're going to be able to keep it at the 28,800. Okay, and that's for formula cost reimbursement. Now, for professional core, you can apply for up to $1,000 as a cost per MSY. Again, the rationale behind that is that the salaries for those AmeriCorps members, or the stipends, I'm sorry, are paid by the school district. And then the professional core fixed amount grant, same thing, up to $1,000. And full cost fixed amount grants are capped at 21,600. So that's not nearly as high as the cost reimbursement. So that's also a factor determining whether or not you want to go to fixed amount grant. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. This is an important slide also. This is giving you all of the different types of member positions. So another word for this is slot types. Remember, we talked a little bit about what MSY, and then so if your members are not full-time and you can bring in other types of slot types, okay? Next to the slot types column. So first we have full-time, three-quarter time, half-time, and so on, okay? So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 types that, you know, of slot types. Most of our programs are full-time. Most of our programs bring in full-time members only, or a combination of full-time and half-time. Some programs, particularly school-based programs, because the schools operate on a 9-month calendar, and maybe some summer programs, summer programming as well. A lot of them like to use the three-quarter time or 1,200 hours of hours. So the minimum number of hours column means that those AmeriCorps members, in order to achieve their education award, need to meet the minimum number of hours. So for three-quarter time, it's 1,200. For half-time, 900 hours. Reduced half-time slots have to do, those members have to complete 675 hours. Quarter time, 450, and so on and so forth. Generally, minimum time and abbreviated time are program or slot types that are used in summer. For very short time periods, where, you know, they may want to bring in a cadre of members just to do summer service or something. Sometimes abbreviated time can be for things like spring break, where you would bring in members, you know, to kind of do something during winter, and or combination of winter and spring break, and they would get 100 hours worth. Right now in New Jersey, we do not have any abbreviated time members. It's not a slot that's very attractive. Most of our programs are full-time, three-quarter time, half-time, We have a few reduced half-time, and again, some that are doing quarter time. So the quarter time and minimum time basically are slots that are very attractive to universities and colleges. We have about 3 of them that in our portfolio that where the members are still in college and they're taking classes, but they also want to be able to do service. And so 450 hours or 300 hours tends to be more popular in that particular group type. All right, looking at the MSY column. So as you can see, these go from one complete MSY all the way down to 0.212 minimum time. So 0.212 basically is representative of what those 300 hours are out of what's considered a full-time equivalent. So it's 0.212 out of that one full-time equivalent. That's the proportion, okay? So this is important basically when you think about how many minimum time members do you need constitute one MSY. So you're looking at, it's actually a little bit less than 5. So you're going to be looking at 0.212 times, 5, it is like 1 point something, 1.2 MSYs. Okay, that's important because again, it depends on how many MSYs you're going to be applying for. That determines what your maximum allocation in terms of funds can be. Okay, minimum total living allowance. Okay, so the minimum is the amount that's there, 16,502 for full time. You can go as high as 33,004. But I will tell you that if you go up to the 33,004, you're going to be exceeding your maximum cost per MSY. So oftentimes there's a combination of sometimes organizations kicking in some of their own dollars for the AmeriCorps stipend, or just basically going up as far as they can, to and still have some money left over for operations. And I'll give you a slide to show what that correlation is. But basically this chart is something that I would print out and just keep it with your budget, as you're constructing your budget, so that you understand what's going to go into the costs of those members and so on. I will tell you that the most successful programs in recruiting and retaining members provide more than the minimum amount of living allowance. And I'll show you that in a minute. Go to the next slide. Okay, so here's an example of a full-time stipend based on a full-time stipend. Looking at the 16,502, that is the minimum amount. Okay, so you have to provide your full-time members with at least 16,502. The education award corresponding to that is 6,345. And the total of that is, so I'm looking at the value of the stipend plus the education award, because one of the things that we constantly hear from our programs is, oh my God, we're having a hard time recruiting because, members can get paid more by getting a job at such and such place or whatever. So when they say that to me, they're only considering the value of the stipend. So in this slide, I want to demonstrate what the value is of the stipend in addition to the education award. The total is 22,847. And if you divide that by 1,700 hours, which is what they're expected to do, that comes out to about $13 an hour. Now, that education award is held at the National Service Trust. So it's kind of like, okay, you're going to get this value, but that portion of that education award is kind of deferred gratification. It's going to be held at that trust until you finish your service, and you could either use it to pay for, pay back college loans or pay future tuition or whatever. Okay, so I just want to point that out. Our members cannot get paid on an hourly basis. I want to make that distinction because I don't want it to seem like, oh, you're getting paid $13 an hour. That is not the way this works. Your members are going to get their stipend, and it's going to be prorated for 26 pay periods, and they're going to get the same amount each pay period. Okay, and then that education award is going to be held until the end of the service. If you provide your member a stipend of $18,000, the value of that stipend plus education award is about $14 an hour. Okay. And then the value of a member making 20,000 in their stipend is about $15 an hour. So I just want to demonstrate this to you because oftentimes, again, you know, when you're recruiting your members, you may want to point out, okay, so you're only going to get this in a stipend, but you're also going to get an education award, and the combination that you, okay, this is what the value would be if you were to be getting paid on an hourly basis. Okay. All right. Okay, when you construct your budget, okay, this is just what I typically do and I recommend to people is your AmeriCorps budget is going to be in three different sections. Section 1 is going to be all of your operating costs, your staff, you know, your personnel, the benefits, things like travel, supplies, all of those things that you need to run your program. Section 2 is all of your member living costs. So once you've determined how many members you want, you're going to work out what I recommend is work out that member living cost section first, because then you'll know how much money you have left over after you pay your members and take care of all of their costs to allocate to the other two portions of your budget, which are, again, section 1, the operating, and then section 3 will be your administrative costs. Okay, so stay with me on this one. The member living costs, I'm going to show you two different scenarios. One is based on the minimum scenario of 10 full-time being paid the minimum amount, and then the other scenario is based on increasing your member stipends to 20,000. Again, keep in mind that the more you provide your members with a stipend, a higher stipend, the easier it will be to retain and to recruit and retain those members. And in today's, you know, economy, the dollars do count. Okay, so all right, so 10 full-time members times 16,502 will give you about $165,020. Then you provide the FICA at 0.0765, workers' comp, and this is, again, this is based on your organization, so I just put 0.015. I don't know how close that is to each organization's, but basically this is a cost that you will need to be able to provide workers' comp to your members, okay, if they need it, whether you pay it out of your organization or whether you pay it out of direct, you can allocate it as a direct cost in your federal side. Healthcare, okay, so in this case I only put 8 AmeriCorps members because you as an organization will have to provide healthcare to your full-time members. Now, oftentimes those full-time members are covered either under a spouse or under a parent. If they're up to 26 years old, oftentimes they're covered under a parent. If they're married, they're covered, sometimes covered by a spouse's insurance, work insurance. So there's typically some amount of members that are covered in one way or another. The other way that a lot of them could be covered or often get covered is if they don't, if your organization has healthcare, you could provide healthcare through your own organization, or you can do what's called the, like, kind of, it's kind of AmeriCorps healthcare through what's called Core Network. And I put down an estimate of about $2,000. It's a very no frills kind of healthcare. But basically, those are the two ways. The other way is that the member go to the marketplace for healthcare, and they can buy their own healthcare, and then your organization would reimburse them for that. So you would have to have something kind of set up to reimburse them on that. So you could either put down 10 full-time members, you know, all, you know, you're going to cover all their healthcare, or I put 8 because, like I said, usually there's at least a couple that are covered by a parent or a spouse. Okay. If they are not, you will have to provide for those full-time members, though, just so that you know. Now, less than full-time members, half-time members, three-quarter-time members, you do not have to provide health care. And the health care that you provide is only for the members, not their families, not their children, and so on. Okay. All right. So going back to this again, the cost per MSY here is 28,800. So the maximum award that we see for this would be 280,000. It's actually should be 288,000. I apologize. But basically what you do is you minus the section 2 costs of 196,119. Okay. And you would be able to allocate the amount of about 83,881 to your operations and your administrative costs. Now, that's not a lot of money, obviously, when you're talking about paying for a full-time person to run this program, providing supplies and all these other things. But I can only tell you that the cost per MSY is much higher than what it was before. Typically, most of our AmeriCorps members were only able to cover the cost of the members, and then they had to come up with their own organizational funds to cover their program manager and all of the other operating costs. At least now they are able to have a few dollars to be able to provide for their program operations. Now, under scenario 2, we increased the amount of the members' stipend. And again, if you go through the whole same process, you wind up with $45,700 to allocate to your operations and administrative costs. So there is a direct correlation between the amount that you give your member in their stipends and their costs to what you have left over to allocate to your to your operations. So it is up to you how you're going to determine how much you want to provide to your member, as long as you don't exceed the maximum. But just be aware that the federal funding portion is capped at a particular cost per MSY and a particular amount of funds that it can give you. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, minimum overall share. So there are match requirements. In the last 1, 2, 3, I believe 3 years, and including the current year, AmeriCorps has waived that because of the pandemic, but we do not anticipate that happening for the year starting September of 22. So you will need to incur match or provide match, I should say. And for new programs, they would start at a match level of 24% for the first 3-year cycle. So you will provide 24%, and that would be for years 1, 2, and 3. If you recompete for another 3-year cycle, you would then start looking at year 4, 5, and 6, and it starts to increase each year by about 4 points. The first 3 years, 24%, year 4 would be at 26%, year 5, 30%, year 6, and so on, up until year 10 at 50%. And I can say we do have several programs that are actually at 50%. And so those costs or that match can be cash or in kind or a combination of both. It typically requires documentation of in-kind match. So just be aware that, that whoever's doing your fiscal, it's usually some kind of partnership between your fiscal person, your program manager, to make sure that that documentation is provided. So for instance, if you have somebody coming in and giving a presentation, and they're going to, they typically would be paid for their presentation, let's say $500, but they're doing it a gratis as something for your organization. They're just doing it as a service. You can actually claim that $500 that they would typically charge as in-kind match. Okay, and you would have the program manager would give you that documentation, and then you would hold on to that, because you will need to demonstrate your match as in your general ledger, as a revenue and as an expense. Okay, so you want to make sure that your general ledger demonstrates your match and has a dedicated match column for all of your match as well. Okay, all right. Budgeting administration. So we did not do this year because of pandemic, but we will be starting this up again. Basically, applicants may allocate administrative funds for their programs. Okay, so you can do up to 5% or 0.0526% of your sections 1 and 2 direct federal costs, and you can claim 5% of that. Okay, but if you have a program, but we also have what's called a commission deduction for things that we use for training that we conduct, as well as for our management systems for your reporting and those kinds of things. So if your program requests 12 or less MSYs, you do not have to allocate any portion of the administrative allowance to the commission. Okay, you can keep that complete 0.0526% for your organization and claim that. If your program is requesting 13 to 17 MSYs, you should allocate 1% of your administrative allowance to the commission using this formula, section 1 plus section 2 costs times 0.0526 times 0.20, and that would constitute the commission share. The rest you would claim for your organization. If you have 18 or more MSYs, you should allocate 2% of your administrative allowance to the commission. And that's basically the formula to do that. Most of our new programs generally start at 10 MSYs, maybe 15 MSYs, but most of them kind of stay with about 10 MSYs because, again, they're trying AmeriCorps for the first time. Again, they're learning the ropes about this. So, you know, that's basically, usually we don't deduct for those programs. Okay. All right. Next one. Next slide. Okay. This is basically instructions on how you submit your application in eGrants. So just be aware, once I open the Prime, I may include additional instructions. It would be on our website. So just be aware of that. Check our website every once in a while as well. Okay, but for now, you can follow these instructions. Okay. Okay. Program manager trainings and meetings. So starting strong is required for program managers to attend. It's generally 3 days. It will probably be in person this year, or at least a portion of it may be in person. A portion of it may be done via Zoom virtually. In the last 2-3 years, we've done it virtually because of the pandemic, but a lot depend. We'll make those determinations as the year, you know, progresses. But it's basically 3 days of staff attending from your organization, and it is mandatory. If your staff misses this, and even if you don't have a staff person hired for your program, if you're new, I highly recommend that somebody that's able to teach them, that, you know, once you hire them, come to this training. It is mandatory for someone to attend from your organizations. We also have usually one day where we have a fiscal training for your fiscal people, as well as a segment for your ED, so that they understand, you know, the support that's needed to run their AmeriCorps program, and so that they get an understanding of AmeriCorps in general. There's also the Ask Regional training. It's 3 days. Also, this is generally held outside of New Jersey, in another state. This year, it's going to be in Burlington, Vermont. Every organization, every program that we fund has to send at least one person to this training, and has to budget for it in their application. I will have a sample budget. Again, I will have it online on our website that you may want to refer to with some recommended amounts generally, you know, for that purpose. But that training is run by the America's State Commissions. It's a national organization that does a lot of training for us as well. And then other training that we do is Career Day, Site Supervisor training. If we do those in the year, again, your program managers have to attend that as well. And your site supervisors are also would have to attend as well. Participate in all monthly conference calls or meetings. So generally we do once a month conference call with all of our program managers as a group. And then every program is assigned a program officer at our commission who will kind of be their person to contact for anything. And that person, they have a monthly, generally what's called a monthly catch-up call, where they talk about how the program is progressing and so on. So we maintain a lot of contact with our program managers throughout the year. We often have trainings for them as well, and meetings and those kinds of things. So figuring the cost for transportation, meals, possible overnight accommodations related to all of the commission's training sessions. Again, Starting Strong is free, but if you're going to be sending individuals, we always have it at the Marriott in Princeton, the Forrestal Marriott. You might want to budget for things like a room for 2 nights, dinner, you know, those kinds of things. We generally cover the costs of meals during the day, and so on. So again, the sample budget will give you some information on that. Okay, next. Okay, all AmeriCorps members and program managers are required to attend the following also. Okay, so AmeriCorps Launch is basically a swearing in for our AmeriCorps members. It's kind of a, you know, a very celebratory day of, you know, this is what to expect in your year and so on. So we do bring on speakers and those kinds of things. I do believe that this year we're going to have a governor's conference, and generally on the year we have a governor's conference, Launch becomes part of that conference. And again, I'm not positive yet because there's some things that may have to happen for that to take place, but if not, then we just generally have a launch. It's usually in person, but again, I don't know how things are gonna, you know, how things are gonna happen this year because we're kind of winding down for the pandemic. But if there's another wave, you know, we may change back to virtual. So, but try to fit in the cost for that for your members attending as well. It's generally a one-day thing. End of year training is kind of another celebratory thing. It's kind of at the end of the year where we do awards, we celebrate the members, we celebrate the programs and so on. And we have some speakers, you know, kind of sending them off into, you know, the world of life after AmeriCorps. And another training that we also do for our AmeriCorps members often, but not every year, is the career day training. And that's actually coming up this year on March 23rd. So we typically do that in March. Okay, additional application resources, you can check the AmeriCorps.gov website for other things on AmeriCorps that you might just want to look at. Sometimes they have tools, sometimes tutorials, checklists, logic model instructions, and all kinds of things, frequently asked questions. Just to take a deeper dive into the world of AmeriCorps, you might want to take a look at that as well. And then to look at all of the regulations, take a look at ecfr.gov. There's a lot of them. It's great night reading if you're into that. But you know, again, it's a little bit onerous, but you will definitely be held to all of the rules and regulations of AmeriCorps. Okay. Here's our contact information. And if you have any questions, we will have a live Q&A. So please feel free to send us, you know, questions. This will be available, this recording will be available for you to view as often as you think you may need to refer to it as well. Okay, and thank you. I hope you all have learned a little bit more about AmeriCorps, and that if it is a good fit for your organization, you make that determination. We look forward to receiving your application. Thank you.
Thank you. I hate hearing my own voice. I don't know about you guys, but I just.
Okay, so we are available if anybody has any questions that they want to ask at this time. Either shout it out or put it into the chat. However, we did have a few questions you can actually refer to in the chat if you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Vinny.
There was just an email this morning about the DUNS and the SAM.
Yes.
So is that different than what we recorded last week?
So I think that they've gotten a little more specific in that information, Vinny. We'll at least, is there a way of posting that information on the website for the DUNS, the information on the new
I can add it to the website, and I can email this group as well.
Okay, that'd be great.
Directly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay. So are there any questions, anyone? Matthew, I see your hand up.
I had a quick question about the evidence tiers. I saw that we get assigned an evidence tier. Is that something that do we request being assigned an evidence tier, or do we just choose one and then communicate that?
You would choose one and communicate it.
Okay.
If the readers feel that your evidence tier that you claimed is not actually, you know, what you presented, but is a different tier, they may decide to take away points. A lot depends on, you know, where you are. Like, for instance, if you claimed a moderate evidence tier, but you didn't provide enough information to support that, then they might want to put you at the preliminary or preliminary, and then you might lose some points. So I would definitely take a look at the mandatory supplemental guidance for the definitions of the evidence tiers, and see where your evidence lies and claim that tier at that point.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay,
I actually had a couple other questions, but
sure.
okay.
ahead.
I had a question. Is the education award counted in the max cost per MSY?
No, the education award
All
is
right,
held
cool.
at the National Service Trust. So you don't have to
Alright.
budget for that. The other thing that AmeriCorps members get as a benefit if they need it is childcare. And that is also not included. The cost of the childcare is actually not included in your budget as well.
All right, cool.
Okay.
I
I
do have a
definitely
question,
recommend,
too.
I will have a sample budget up. Probably I would say the latest mid next week. I apologize, I couldn't get it
Okay.
up sooner. It takes a while to develop sometimes, so I'll have either one or two scenarios there available, okay?
Cool.
Our Prime is open. You actually can go in and open up your application as of today. I will be putting more detailed information in terms of how to create your application in eGrants by the end of tomorrow. So I have it written out. I just haven't typed it up and put it up on the website. So I will have that for you also as well.
I do have one question. On your sample budget that you show, that's not for the health insurance for full-time members. Is that a capped line item? I
No,
know. Okay, 'cause that
you
was a
can
very
put
low
whatever you
amount.
want to put under the health. That
Okay.
was just an example. I will also try to get the figures from Core Network for the actual costs. Or I'll ask one of our existing programs what their amounts are for healthcare.
I know
you know,
healthcare is really expensive now.
Healthcare is
One of our
very
largest-
expensive and is one of the reasons why some of our programs go with 3/4 time members
Right.
or half-time members,
That was a big point that you just jumped out at me when you said that. That's
Yes.
going to make me rethink the program a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, because even if they go to the marketplace, you are required as a program to reimburse them on that. So
Right.
again, it works both ways though, because it's a benefit that, again, would help you in recruitment, possibly, because, they're getting that healthcare. But, you as an organization have to think what's best, in your situation.
No vision, no dental.
I'm sorry, somebody?
Bob, you're muted.
Bob, are you on?
Yes.
Can you just speak a little louder?
He said no vision, no mute. I'm sorry, dental, no dental.
Yeah, so that does not include vision and dental. That is correct. You're not required to provide that. Yeah. You're only also required to provide healthcare for the member, not their family. Okay.
Hold on a second.
I can select the Prime. So here's the thing. When you go in to create your program, you are going to select new. Okay, when you go into your homepage in Egrants, you're going to go down, you're going to see where it says, is this a new application? You're going to hit new. And then you're going to select your program area on the next screen. There's a drop down, you'll select AmeriCorps. And then the Nofa that you select will say FY 2022 AmeriCorps State and Territory Commission. And in quotes, it'll say new and continuation. The due date will say January 5th, 2022. The reason for that is because it all refers back to the original NOFO that was developed for the competitive in the fall. Don't worry about that due date. The actual due date to us is on April 21st, 2022. Okay, so but the NOFA that you're going to be opening has that date of 1/5/2022. And it'll say this application is for new, recompeting, or continuation state commission applicants, okay, including territories with commissions. Then you're going to apply for new grant, the new grant link. Okay, it'll say, is this for a new grant or a continuation? It may or may not say that depending on whether you're recompete. You're going to hit new grant. And then you're going to pick New Jersey from the drop down. Okay, there'll be a drop down of states. You'll pick New Jersey. And then there'll be the option to pick our prime number, which is 22 AC 246076, and it'll say formula programs. Okay, so I'll repeat that number again. It's 22 AC 246076. Okay, so if you see that prime, you'll know you're in the correct prime. Okay, now that is for just the formula. We don't have any recompetes right now for formula fixed. And if you're going to be new, you're not going to be applying for a fixed amount grant anyway. So I did not include the fixed in that. Okay.
I have one question just kind of about structuring the service member terms. Like we're probably looking at 3/4 time because this is more like seasonal work. This is the climate resiliency stuff. Just looking at the nature of like the outdoor work, we could potentially either start everybody in, January, February and work through the end of the term, or potentially, have them work a couple months in the fall, but then we'd have kind of like a break of term over the winter. Do you get any experience or guidance on kind of having contiguous like term times with?
So we have not, however, if that is the way that your design is because of the nature of the work, then you would just have to explain that in your application. It would probably be allowable because of again, if you're doing mostly outdoor, but we do have some programs that tend to do a lot of training in those winter months then, where they do a lot of team building, things, or for instance, one of our environmental programs does a lot of school related education where they go to classrooms or they do demonstrations at different, indoor events. And that's how those members make up their hours. What is key is that you provide enough time for those programs, for those members to be able to adequately fill their responsible number of hours. Otherwise, they're not going to get their education award. And it's really important that you build in some downtime as well, because there are things like storms that happen, weather that happens, that prevent school. If you're an education program, you have to think about, winter breaks, spring breaks, those kinds of things. So you always have to build in some extra time. Emergencies happen and, those kinds of things. So you just keep that in mind that they have to. And the other thing is for full-time members, they do 35 to 40 hours a week. Generally, part-time, meaning half-time, do about 20 hours a week, 20 to 25 hours a week at a minimum. So just bear that in mind, okay, that you're going to need to develop a schedule with them that takes them, throughout that time. Okay.
But we can kind of average that time out over like the course of the term. So if they were, training,
yes,
a couple days a week, when we hit, full season, they can, then they'll be working 40, or can they work more than 40 hours a week?
We generally try to dissuade that because we don't want the members to feel like, they're, that they're in a, position where they're just, exhausted all the time or whatever. We've had some where we've allowed like up to 45 hours, but, we tend not to have them do more than 40 hours a week. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? There's no such thing as a bad question or anything. They're all good questions. So, and it's very hard for us as staff to think about every possible scenario. So your questions are good questions for us.
Hi, this is Ragish. We're from Relay, and we're a continuation.
Yes, your
formula
continuation
grant.
prime. Hold on, Ragisha. I did write down the prime for the.
Oh, I appreciate that. I always feel better.
Yes.
It just all lines up in Egrants.
Yes, hold on one second. Let me just see where I wrote that. I did write it somewhere. If I didn't write it, then I will get back to you on that. Oh, yeah, here it is. So the formula fixed, yes, is exactly 246071. And that prime is
Perfect.
open. Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're
And just
welcome.
to check my understanding, if we have a request for more than 18 members, which we will, we should do the 2% administrative costs in the budget, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, if you have other questions, please send them to us at the New Jersey AmeriCorps .sos.nj .gov. Okay. Okay. I know I have a mental block about that. I always used to, it was since Lisa came on, Lisa's the one that kind of developed our general AmeriCorps email. And I always used to have just give my own email, but this works better for us. So
I have it written on my wall, so don't even,
okay,
what
Lisa.
am I talking about?
Okay. So yeah, so if you have any additional questions, please send them to us and we'll go from there. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful and at least getting a little more perspective on AmeriCorps and the application process. And again, as you see moving forward, let us know. Okay.
See you in 2 days on Friday.
That's right. Friday. Yes. Talking about that, Lisa, we need to check in with them. So
This afternoon.
yeah. Oh, okay, good.
And program managers, we have a call this afternoon and Friday. Thank you.
All righty.
We'll post more updates.
Oh,
to the
wait,
website
Matthew,
after the recording.
Matthew?
Matthew,
I
you
have
have
a
another
question
question?
about this afternoon for program managers.
Yes.
Is that this link as well? Or is that like a continuation of this training, this technical assistance?
No,
or is that
that's for
different?
our existing programs. We have
Oh,
a
okay.
weekly call
All right.
with all of our existing programs.
Okay.
Matthew, you're from which program is it?
Aspire, New Jersey
Aspire.
by Sewa International.
Okay.
It's an
Yeah,
out of
so
school
you're not a
team.
program yet at this point.
Yeah.
You're just in the process of looking at this for application process.
Yep.
So feel free to contact us.
And this link is good for Friday's meeting. So Friday's the technical with the Montclair Crees.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All righty.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Have
thank
a
you.
great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.